Unfortunately, a trade war has developed between the United States and China, and ultimately the loser will be the United States, its people, its business, its consumer base. We are not close to a deal, mostly because Donald Trump is severely outclassed on the world stage, both overall in foreign policy and when it comes to trade negotiations. I actually feel very sorry for Donald Trump's trade negotiators having to try to negotiate a trade agreement on behalf of Donald Trump and his very political and economic schizophrenia. He has no core ideals or beliefs on anything. The concept of America first is vague and ambiguous. He has no core principles when it comes to any sort of core beliefs. His sole purpose is to use a trade war to gin up his political base and to try to create an artificial notion that by beating up on China, somehow the American manufacturing base as it existed 40 years ago will miraculously return, when in fact that is patently false, and he lacks the courage of conviction to tell the people of the United States that the economy has fundamentally changed, not only in the United States, but on the globe itself. So instead of investing in long-term education programs and technical training and re-educating the workforce to adapt to the new global economy, he is creating a false notion that somehow we can revert back to the past and have the 1950s economy, and sadly, people are believing him. In the long term, there's going to be a lot of very crashed expectations when all of this doesn't happen. Ultimately, the U.S., its business, especially small business, its workers, and consumer base will bear the overall brunt of this trade war. China is nowhere near as dependent on the American economic base and market as the U.S. is heavily dependent on the Chinese market. So what will happen is, as China has cultivated markets in India, Russia, the Middle East, Central America, Latin America, the United States has not cultivated those markets, and in fact does not have near the trading presence in those markets. In fact, China has openly developed a very aggressive trading market in Africa, where the United States is not. In fact, the only thing America has expanded is war. So looking at the broader picture, what will happen is that tariffs as a result of this trade war will result in increased wholesale prices to American business. That will be passed on to the American consumers, which we are already seeing in increased prices from everything from foodstuffs to hard goods, and which will have a tremendous negative impact on family budgets. And family budgets in the United States are already stretched to the max. We see article after article that despite the booming economy, which is artificial, Americans more and more are struggling. Some 30 to 40% of Americans are one paycheck away from an economic catastrophe. Donald Trump's trade war will only complicate the situation. And adding to this is the plight of American farmers, who wholly supported Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has had to resort to Soviet-style socialism to keep his political base in the farming community happy. It's interesting, Donald Trump and the Republicans wail against socialism, but they have adopted and dispersed direct government payments to offset the tremendous losses that farmers are experiencing from Donald Trump's trade war. Donald Trump did run for president wailing and attacking China, much like he attacked Japan back in the late 1980s and 1990s. Donald Trump has to have a boogeyman in order to exist. He has no core values. He has no core principles. He is the atypical fascist in that he cannot convince anybody to vote for him. He has to convince them to vote against something, whether it's true or not. That is why he is the champion of Islamophobia. That is why he is the champion of xenophobia. His attacks on Huawei, the Chinese technology giant, is another example of this. Literally engaging in warfare on a Chinese technology company, which means he's essentially engaging in putting his finger on the scale. That is just more of the same from Donald Trump.